Conscience rights. Government officials say the largest hospital in Vermont forced a Catholic nurse to participate in an abortion. Inspector General's report. A government watchdog releases the findings from its probe into former FBI Director James Comey. Power play. Analysis of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's move toward having Britain leave the European Union. And Christian unity. A leader from the Anglican Church visits a Catholic church in Sri Lanka. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 29th, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. The Trump administration is accusing an academic hospital in Vermont of forcing a Catholic nurse to help with an abortion. It's the largest hospital in the state, and now the Health and Human Services Department is taking action. Correspondent Jason Calvi reports from outside HHS headquarters in Washington.
Wyatt, that Catholic nurse is keeping her name private, but her lawyer tells me she was traumatized and is no longer working at the University of Vermont Medical Center. Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights says she went in for what she thought was a miscarriage. It turned out to be an abortion. She asked for a replacement. It was denied. Now investigators here say the hospital broke the law. HHS accuses the University of Vermont Medical Center of discriminating against pro-life healthcare workers. The nurse's lawyer says the hospital was toxic.
She was scrubbed into a procedure thinking it was a perfectly morally neutral procedure, only to find, to her horror, that it was actually an elective termination. So the toxic atmosphere arises out of the fact that not only was she knowingly, by her superiors, sent into this procedure, but she and others were being scheduled for elective abortions, even though their superiors knew they were religiously opposed.
But the hospital's interim president defends its policies.
We did a very thorough investigation when we first learned of this complaint, and we're very comfortable that their allegations do not support the facts of the case.
U.S. law protects the conscience rights of healthcare workers. According to law, institutions receiving certain federal funds cannot discriminate against workers who won't help in sterilizations or abortions. But it's not always followed. I met a different Catholic nurse who says she was forced to take part in an abortion against her faith.
I still have nightmares about that day.
Healthcare conscience cases like hers now flood the Department of Health and Human Services. Only 10 complaints came in during the Obama presidency over 8 years. Since President Trump's election, the number has spiked. In 2018 alone, HHS received 1,300 religious or conscience complaints.
Things are changing for the better.
Last year, HHS launched a division for conscience and religious freedom within its Office of Civil Rights to investigate these cases.
The federal government has not always been as protective of religious freedom as it is required to be, and that is changing today, here, and now.
Director Roger Severino says this is the third time they've gone after those they deem to have violated conscience protections. Investigators here say there were other examples at that same hospital of people who objected to abortion being asked to help or assist at them. The hospital now has 30 days, and Director Severino says he's willing to help them to get their policies to follow federal law. Here in Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now is Sister Dede Byrne. She is Mother Superior of the Little Workers of the Sacred Hearts in Washington, D.C., and she's a general surgeon. Sister, welcome into the newscast. You've worked around the world as a medical doctor. You're familiar with a whole range of situations that medical professionals find themselves in. Have you heard of similar situations where nurses are forced to violate their beliefs?
Well, I have. We've actually got a hospital here in D.C. that has expanded their, they call it reproductive rights, to the second trimester abortion, basically baby killing in the second trimester, which changes the whole situation. And a lot of the nurses and some of the doctors there, anesthesiologists, have been very disturbed by that. And there's pressure about, being a part of that. I have a friend in England who's had to suffer through difficulties with her father being threatened to be euthanized. So this is going on around the world, from attacking the elderly, euthanasia, infant infanticide with, and also abortion, baby killing business, basically.
Because it feels to me like these medical professionals are under this pressure. It appears to put them in a position where they almost feel like they'll risk their jobs if they object.
They definitely will risk their jobs if they object.
And so critics say they allow healthcare workers to opt out of procedures they object to based on religious or moral grounds. And they say when that happens, there's a negative impact on patient care. How do you respond to that?
That almost could be a sign in a joke book, because I think, first of all, abortion's not health care. That's the baby killing business. And the best kind of healthcare worker you want is someone who loves their work and is really passionate about doing something they can for the patient. So if you have someone who's struggling with the issue, it's better healthcare that they not be a part of that procedure.
And so, like I said, there's so many talented medical professionals out there who do have some sort of moral or religious objection.
There's
so
many.
You're isolating so many people.
Right.
How do you think Catholic and other pro-life healthcare workers then can ensure their conscience objections are respected?
I think we have to stick together as Catholic professionals. First and foremost, because we are Catholic professionals, we're physicians and nurses and healthcare people for our Lord, for Jesus. So we have to remain in the state of grace. So try to receive our Lord as often as you can. My father was a thoracic surgeon. He was a daily Mass goer. Go to Mass. Just stay in the state of grace. Receive communion, confession, pray the rosary, have our Blessed Mother with us. And, it's really a battle against good and evil, against, Jesus Christ and the devil. So we are the warriors for our Lord, and we stick together as a band. We can make more noise. As one of my superior used to say, 2 nuts in a bag make more noise than one. So we have to just stick together and stand strong. And we might end up having to do what Thomas More did, not maybe die, but you might lose your job. But we have to, it's far better, I think, to lose a job than to lose my faith in Jesus Christ.
A lot of really good points there, especially the fact that a good reminder that we are still in a spiritual battle.
Right.
Sister Dede Byrne, Mother Superior of the Little Workers of the Sacred Hearts in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
The Justice Department says James Comey leaked classified information after he was fired by President Trump in 2017. The DOJ Inspector General released a report today. It says the former FBI director handed over parts of memos to a friend who then released the information to the media in the days after Comey was fired. He also failed to notify the FBI after he was fired that he had retained some memos at his house. The Department of Justice has decided not to prosecute. Hurricane Dorian poses an increasing threat tonight to Florida as it barrels towards the state's east coast. Last night, the storm left behind some damage in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Now state governors and even President Donald Trump urge caution. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports.
Wyatt, President Trump is calling on Florida to be prepared, but Dorian's exact path is still hard to predict at this point. Forecasters say it could land anywhere along a 500-mile stretch from the Florida Keys to southern Georgia. As we watch, this storm is growing more powerful. Minor damage aside, Hurricane Dorian spared Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands yesterday, but the U.S. mainland is now in its sights. Forecasters say Dorian could reach landfall Sunday night or Monday morning as a Category 4 storm with 130-mile-per-hour winds. President Trump tweeted today, "Be prepared and please follow state and federal instructions. It will be a very big hurricane, perhaps one of the biggest." Along much of Florida's Atlantic coast, shoppers bought emergency supplies at supermarkets and hardware stores. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is encouraging people to stock up with 7 days' worth of food, medicine, and water.
The time to act is now. If you haven't acted, act to make preparations. Do not wait until it's too late.
The governor has declared a state of emergency for 26 East Florida counties that could be affected, but acknowledges the path of Dorian is uncertain.
You can make a case that this could have an effect in virtually every part of the state. I urge you to follow local reports.
Just to the north, Georgia is also on edge. Governor Brian Kemp says the state is preparing for a number of scenarios, including evacuations. Dorian is the first hurricane to hit the U.S. since President Trump batted back something he called fake news. He tweeted days ago, "The story by Axios that President Trump wanted to blow up large hurricanes with nuclear weapons prior to reaching shore is ridiculous. I never said this."
That was Mark Irons reporting. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says President Trump has assured the state of federal assistance. The White House announced this afternoon that the president will no longer go to Poland this weekend as Hurricane Dorian approaches. Vice President Pence will go in his place. China's military is deploying fresh troops to Hong Kong. Beijing calls it a routine rotation, but there are fears the army will intervene in ongoing pro-democracy protests. Armored cars, trucks, and a patrol boat were shown crossing the border into the former British territory. Hong Kong has been the site of 3 months of anti-government demonstrations. Philippines leader Rodrigo Duterte is in China meeting with President Xi Jinping. The two are expected to discuss the disputed South China Sea. A ruling in 2016 mostly invalidated Beijing's claim to the entire body of water. For years, the disagreement over the major global shipping route has marred the relationship between Beijing and the Philippines. Syria's White Helmet Civil Defense Forces rescued people trapped under a building in Idlib. It had been targeted yesterday in a Syrian government airstrike. Officials say 12 people were killed and 34 others were wounded. The government offensive began in April. More than 2,000 people have been killed. The raging fires in the Amazon are moving closer to the region's indigenous community. One villager patrols the area to protect it from illegal loggers and miners. He says the blaze is only about 12 miles away. Officials say more than 3,500 fires are burning in nearly 150 indigenous territories.
Oggi stesso avvierò le consultazioni con tutti I gruppi parlamentari.
Giuseppe Conte says he will try to assemble a new governing party in Italy. He resigned as prime minister last week amid the collapse of the 14-month-old government. The country's president asked Conte to stay on as premier. The move is aimed at blocking a recent power grab by Matteo Salvini. His popularity has soared on his anti-migration policies. The Vatican says Pope Francis is pleased with the progress made in Christian-Muslim dialogue 6 months after his trip to the United Arab Emirates. In February, the Holy Father made history by becoming the first pope to visit the Arabian Peninsula. In Abu Dhabi, he signed a joint Catholic-Muslim declaration with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. He is considered to be, by some Muslims, to be the highest authority in Sunni Islamic thought. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. He traveled with the Holy Father earlier this year on that historic Middle East trip. Edward, first of all, tell us about the trip and what it meant for Muslim-Catholic dialogue.
Well, it was a very historic trip, Wyatt. It was the first trip by a pope to the Arab Peninsula, so it was a very significant and historic event. And it was very important for Catholic-Muslim dialogue in the sense that there was this big human fraternity document that was signed by the chief imam, the Grand Imam of Al-Aqsa University, which is the highest former institute of learning for Sunni Islam, and the Pope. And so it was a very significant event. And of course, with so many Muslims there and the combination with many Christians, it made it a very important event in terms of interreligious dialogue.
How has the United Arab Emirates treated Christians and other religious minorities historically?
Well, actually, one of the better ones in the Middle East, because there's been a lot of immigration there from many Catholics around the world, particularly from parts of Asia. They've come to do a lot of the work there in terms of construction and other things, also domestic work, and that's helped actually to bring a lot of tolerance to the country, although there continues to be quite a bit of discrimination there, and Catholic citizens, Catholic immigrants there are not given full citizenship. And there's still certain restrictions to religious freedom, but nothing like they are perhaps in neighboring Saudi Arabia.
You made mention earlier about the document that both sides agreed to. The Vatican says that declaration the Pope signed is a powerful sign of peace and hope for the future of humanity. But not all Catholic scholars agree. What exactly does the document say, and why did it generate controversy?
Right, well, the document's all about really encouraging mutual respect and human fraternity, peace between religions, peace between peoples, and this new committee that's been set up in the UAE is aimed to promote that. But there's controversy about this document around one particular phrase which affirms that the diversity of religions is willed by God, and this critics say, very prominent philosophers and theologians say that this is actually a break with biblical and church teaching. And Bishop Athanasius Schneider told in an interview recently with LifeSite News that it was actually a betrayal of the gospel, and that it relativizes the uniqueness of Jesus Christ and the church. So very strong statements against this phrase, but also that there's a call there for a correction of this document.
Very interesting. Well, as I mentioned, you were there covering the Pope's trip in the UAE. What did you learn about the country while you were there?
Well, as I said earlier, it's a very interesting country. It brings a lot of religions together. It's a very much the sort of society I think the Pope wants to use as a kind of showcase for how religions can get along, particularly Islam and Christianity. And it's very much the case there. As I said, actually it's a year of tolerance there that's being marked, and they're very keen to emphasize that the UAE is a place of tolerance. So it's an interesting place, and as I say, it was a very historic visit of the Pope in February this year.
Well, we hope they will continue to keep up that idea of tolerance for all people of all faiths. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Thanks very much, Edward.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Coming up, analysis on Boris Johnson and the possible no-deal Brexit. And the Democrats announced the lineup for next month's debate. We'll tell you who made the cut. An analyst says the British government's decision to suspend Parliament will make it harder for opposition lawmakers to stop Britain's exit from the European Union without a deal.
What we now face is Parliament returning next week on Tuesday, sitting for the rest of next week and possibly a day or two into the week after. And in that time, MPs will have to decide whether they have the capacity to get together to pass a law to stop no deal.
Tony Travers from London School of Economics also says it is in the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's best interest to have a deal in place before Brexit, because lawmakers have no idea how a no-deal departure would affect the country. Join me now to take a look at Brexit and where things stand is Desmond Lachman, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. Desmond, welcome back to the newscast. There's been backlash to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson's move to suspend Parliament. The decision's caused a great deal of political uncertainty, but it also seems to increase the odds of a no-deal Brexit with the European Union. So take us back here. Remind us what exactly Brexit is, what does it stand for, and what would it mean, the implications of a no-deal exit?
Brexit is the process of the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. They had a referendum some 2.5 years ago in 2016 where the British voted that they would like to leave Europe by a majority of 52 to 48. We're now getting to the end of a process that Boris Johnson, he became Prime Minister a little while ago, and he's indicated that the United Kingdom will definitely leave Europe with or without a deal on October the 31st. Mm-hmm. The people who are objecting to his parliamentary maneuvers to stifle a debate by suspending Parliament for 3 or 4 weeks, they are very fearful that leaving Europe without a deal will be disastrous for the United Kingdom economy. And that's the reason that they're up in arms against what they're calling his anti-democratic maneuvering to stop Parliament from debating what is the most consequential decision that the United Kingdom will make in the last 40 years.
Right. So what does it mean then, a no deal exit? What are the implications of that?
Well, the Bank of England, for instance, is indicating that if the United Kingdom leaves Europe without a deal, United Kingdom output could decline by as much as 5% relative to where it otherwise would be over the next year or two. So the economic consequences would be enormous. Business is advising Boris Johnson not to go with the hard deal Brexit. But the reason that he's doing this is he's trying to force the Europeans to make concessions before October the 31st so that he can go back to Parliament with a revised deal that his party and others can live with. Neither it's in neither Europe's interest nor the United Kingdom's interest for the United Kingdom to crash out of Europe. But he's playing a very high-stakes game, because if the Europeans don't cave, don't make the concessions that he's asking for, then the default position is that the United Kingdom leaves Europe without a deal on October the 31st, and that could be very disruptive for the United Kingdom economy.
Well, as you mentioned, Parliament suspended. Is there anything the opposition can do, or are they kind of just stuck in limbo?
No, the opposition, they can do stuff, and they're debating it right now. The trouble is that they're somewhat in disarray, but effectively what they can do next week is to stage a vote of no confidence and to force a general election before October the 31st. Even if they can do that, it's not clear whether Boris Johnson will go along with declaring an election before October 31st. He might call the election on November the 1st, in which case it's too late, and then the United Kingdom crashes out of Europe.
Well, I know when we talk about Brexit, all of it can be a bit complicated, so we appreciate your coming in to break it down and explain it all for us. Desmond Lachman, Resident Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The stage is set for next month's Democratic presidential debate in Houston. To qualify, candidates had to hit 2% in at least 4 opinion polls and secure 130,000 unique donors. The 10 candidates who qualified are Joe Biden, Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg, Julian Castro, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Andrew Yang. Those who didn't make the cut include Marianne Williamson, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, among others. And one candidate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, has dropped out of the race. She didn't qualify for the debate. In a tweet, Senator Gillibrand praised her team but said, quote, "I think it's important to know how you can best serve." Up next, Ambassador Callista Gingrich describes the relationship between the Vatican and the United States, and why an Anglican church leader visited Catholic officials in Sri Lanka.
We work with the Vatican to promote our common values around the world.
Callista Gingrich, U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See, describes the relationship between Washington and the Vatican as a worldwide force for good. The U.S. Embassy in the Vatican is celebrating its 35th anniversary. It was established under President Ronald Reagan and St. John Paul II. World-renowned opera star Placido Domingo helps inaugurate a new soccer stadium for a Catholic diocese in Hungary. The bishop leading the diocese called Domingo the Master and thanked him for the performance. The St. Gerard Forum compound includes an 8,000-seat soccer stadium. Domingo has recently been accused of harassment. He denies the claims. The Archbishop of Canterbury calls for Christian unity during a visit to a Catholic church in Sri Lanka attacked by terrorists on Easter Sunday. Justin Welby is on a 3-day trip to the country. He visited St. Sebastian's Church in the seaside town of Negombo. He was joined by Cardinal Malcolm Ranjith of Colombo. Welby is the head of the Anglican Church. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, host Catherine Hadro talks to South Dakota's first female governor. Christine Noam tells Catherine about her pro-life leadership.
So to be the first female governor who can speak from a different perspective on this issue, I think has the potential to be very powerful.
You can see more of Catherine's interview with the governor tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Visit EWTN.com for additional times. And that concludes our newscast for tonight. We thank you for watching. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.